Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. And the story I'm talking about today is episode 76 of my ongoing series of crazy short stories worth 1,000 words, where I write a 1,000 word short story inspired by a piece of artwork on the spot, no outline, and hopefully create some kind of semblance of a tale for you to enjoy or maybe learn from. And today I wrote in a genre I have never written in. It's called science fantasy. And if you do not know what science fantasy is, it's kind of reminiscent of Mobius, the artist I showed last week. Not the artist who did the artwork, but the artist who seemed to inspire the artist. It's kind of a blend of fantasy and science fiction. So you'll have laser guns or technology of some kind, but you'll also have these sprawling castles and dragons or dragon-like creatures. Anyway, it's a great pulpy genre that I enjoyed exploring. I don't know if I nailed it completely, but in any case, it was a good time. Not sure how I feel about the story, but I will get into that more toward the end. So if you'd like to hear my analysis of the tale, then check the chapter selection below. To delve into this space fantasy, this science fantasy setting, I had to go back to my obsession with dungeon synth, which is a genre that I love very, very much, but I had to find something science fiction-y. So I found an album called Star City, and it is by an artist known as the Soviet Space Dog Project. So very ambient, very long tracks. I think each track was like 20 or 30 minutes long, but let us move on and check out this week's artwork. This week's artwork is titled The Riddle, and it's by an artist named Pascal Blanchet from Montreal, Canada. He's actually an art director at Ubisoft. I've actually followed his work for many, many years before he worked at Ubisoft, when he was just a freelance illustrator, and it really got me into 3D. That he's one of my heroes of the 3D space. And so when I saw him posting on ArtStation, I knew I had to take a stab at one of his works to create a story there. So let's take a closer look. We have a lone man with a shield, some kind of sword, walking up to a decapitated head that is half submerged into the ground, and there is a glowing eye peering at him. So very evocative image, and it makes me wonder, what is this man seeking? What is this person seeking? But he does look ready to fight, presumably because the eye is glowing, and who knows what's going to happen. But more importantly, what is the riddle? What is the riddle? That is my job to find out, or not. We'll see how it goes. But Pascal, thank you. It is an honor to attempt to write a story around one of your pieces of artwork. So with that said, let's see what I came up with. Breck recited the last rites of the Calton as the lander made impact. To wander upon... The lander shook and hissed in decompression. Breck muttered his way back to the beginning. When you lose your way, choose the origin over the fray, Elder Moorst had said, his face awash with firelight. But Breck wasn't at the beginning, and he was about to head straight into the fray. Vitorin was a planet of clockwork giants, their clocks never winding down. Enigmas to the Order, these giants were said to possess an esoteric wisdom rumored to hold the secrets they needed. For what? Breck said, testing the oxygen wafting through his respirator. Who were they? Veiled in more than the dusty cloaks in their cobwebbed hold, where the climb had nearly killed him, if not for the moon's guidance, where a memory was locked inside a fall. Breck breathed in synthetics that reminded him too much of home. That smell wouldn't do him any good here. Soon he would smell his own blood. A suicide mission they'd sent him on. Breck said again, tasting it. The lander's hatch panel stared at him, a cinder, glowing, emotionless. The only light in the cramped space. The guts of the lander hung from the ceiling in hoops to trip him up. He shrugged off the one perched on his shoulder. It sprung back up, elastic but hefty, an arterial conduit demonstrating the fragility of its design. He touched his armored midsection, where his own fragility lay. The irony wasn't lost to him as he punched the panel's button. The hatch opened. The ramp thundered onto the surface, hydraulics weakened from the change in gravity. The fog it had disturbed already rolled back, even crawling up, lifelike, sentient. Breck thought he'd cut the lander's tubes and read the entrails as Elder Morse did in secret, locked away in his tower, as if they'd know the riddle he needed the answer to. as if he could read entrails. The wind will carry it to you upon the Fatorian surface, they'd said, wielded by fingers of frost. Breck studied the fog walking its way up the ramp, finger by finger. He unsheathed his plasma sword and cleaved the tendrils before they reached his boots. They dispersed, revealing the pocked surface of Fatorian. The panel's button burned his retinas, then his neck as he looked away, so he set foot upon Fatorian. The sky so dark it had no depth shrouded everything. No stars, no moon. A complete darkness that... Breck rolled out of the way just as a mechanical fist rammed into the surface. The ground fractured into a shower of rocks, and he fell through it, the ice stones biting through his armor. He shook them off before they reached his armor's hex membrane. He ran until he could see stars. Another fist landed. Another. How many arms did this thing have? He looked up to see fiery eyes glaring down at him, and heard the clockwork mantra said to turn bone to ice. Breck found the warning was accurate. His feet locked to the surface as a hand the size of his lander barreled at him with digits spread. He swung his blade to a flurry of sparks. Gravity relented. The ground fell away. His boots dangled and his cape beneath him. Then pressure registered around his torso, as stars flickered through gaps that could only be the space between the fingers of this giant. He breathed in a scent-like home through his ruptured respirator, as what mixed with oxygen seared his nasal passage, his lungs. Then the canopy of stars was complete. He found his footing. All he could see, all he could feel, was a metronome, full of whirs, clicks, and shudders. Breck shuddered, wavered on his feet. His sword and shield counterbalanced him. A network of cables fragmented his view, and he went to touch one. The movement set him off balance, and he fell forward into the web of cables, as thick as his arms, his legs. He was righted again by that great hand, which hummed with the life of the body he stood upon. Within that chorus of life he sensed an anomaly, a hitch in the tempo. Two furnace eyes gazed upon him then, housed within the visor of a helm as pocked as the icy ground. They burned the color of an exit, of a fire upon an old man's face. They burned like the moon that had guided him, but one too many. Breck's chest was exposed, his respirator in shreds. Yet he lived, warmed by those two fires that sought to destroy him, to whisper doubly his demise. The head turned, extinguishing the two fires, and Breck was faced with a wall of coils, thrumming with the anomalous song of "To wander upon the song of the gods." The giant's fingers lowered to its neck, parting the cables to expose a cylindrical enclosure where lightning danced, a cadence unlike the others, to rend the bottled lightning, which would ink the map to salvation. Breck stood poised with his sword, ready to finish the task that had come too easy, a mountain that had carried him to its summit, a path fraught with false dangers. The giant's finger prodded him. Breck sheathed his sword. "No," he said as hands came down in a blur, gripping the head. Breck leaped aside and caught one of the sagging cables to slow his descent, then more wedged behind a joint. By the time he reached the ground, he couldn't feel anything, and gave in to that emptiness. Breck woke to a fire, a single fire, within the visor of a helm pocked like the surface he lay upon. He approached the giant's severed head, and its single eye, which looked like a guiding moon above the hold of conspiring men, where the answer to a riddle had been locked in a fall, now set free. Welcome to the end, dear viewer. I am so glad you made it. This is where I talk about my final thoughts, what I liked, what I didn't like, maybe what I learned, and maybe what you can learn to not do in writing a story. However, as we know, these are all done on the spot without an outline, without any prior thinking or concepting whatsoever, so inevitably there are bound to be mistakes, and there were mistakes this time for sure. So I think I have the sketch of a story. I think I have the foundation of something. But what is missing is that moment when you get to the end and it all makes sense. The beginning makes sense, the end calls back to the beginning, and it's this beautiful circle of story that every word and every action fits right in, and it feels like the character has achieved something or failed at something. So with that said, let me bring up the writing and I will explain what I was trying to do, what I was trying to salvage in this tale that I just didn't quite get to, because here's a screenshot of me writing. You can see it took about 2 hours to complete, and I had to call it. This is as long as I ever like to go. I know I've gone longer before when the story just doesn't come, but anyway, let's dig into the writing here. So what I was trying to do is create imagery. So I was trying to create this man named Breck, this warrior who was sent on this mission to solve the riddle. And so I was trying to do things like have him, he's recounting the last rites of the Calton, which is, some kind of ancient text that is going to help him on his quest, apparently. And so he's trying to recall it here. As in all of these tales, there's always an old mystic, an old wise man who is going to lead the hero on his quest or her quest. And in this case, it is an elder named Murst. In cryptic language, when you lose your way, choose the origin over the fray. I don't really know where that came from. I feel like this would have been a great opportunity to have some kind of payoff in the story. There was no payoff, really, outside of him going back to the last rites of the Calton to try to remember stuff. And so I think that was a missed opportunity where I could have used imagery, I could have used action, things that happened within the story to jog his memory. Kind of did here and there, but let's get into that next, actually. So I start to talk about this order that these on this planet called Fatorian, which I named. There's these mysterious giants, these clockwork giants, and they were said to possess an esoteric wisdom rumored to hold the secrets, what they needed for what. And so I do kind of answer that question when I get to the end. So he's thinking about who they are in his lander as this thing's crashing to the ground. And this is where I sort of indicate that he's forgotten something. And I don't know if it was very clear. He's like, who were they, this order, veiled in more than dusty cloaks in their cobweb hold, where the climb had nearly killed him if not for the moon's guidance. And so this is the key point here. What I'm trying to do is make the moon, which guided him up this cliff, but alas, he felt where a memory was locked inside a fall. So he ended up falling, nearly dying, but clearly surviving. And so that is the first foreshadowing element. Again, I don't know how powerful or clear any of this was. But anyway, we move on. He finally goes down onto the planet's surface, and then he begins to immediately get attacked by this giant, this clockwork giant. And this is again another kind of prophetic saying that they mentioned to him. The wind will carry it to you upon the Fatorian surface. Presumably that is the riddle, wielded by fingers of frost. And so that gave me the idea right here. This is kind of one of those situations where you start seeing things, you think about something, and you're ascribing meaning to them. And so I thought it would be a cool image to have the Breck studied the fog walking its way up the ramp finger by finger. So by personifying the fog, actually Breck personified the fog based on this saying here. And so again, it's more things that are trickling out to sort of help guide him on his quest and maybe illuminate what he needs to find, what this riddle is or what the answer to the riddle is. And so I have a battle with this giant, but there's something I did differently. I really was figuring out, how do I get this giant to remove its head or to lose its head? And I decided that this was kind of a trap in a way, or an unexpected turn where it seems as if the giant is attacking him, but then it kind of kills itself. It's really strange. So at the very top, the giant carries him up to his shoulder, essentially, which starts to kind of jog his memory for this saying, going back to the beginning, so to speak. And we see that he notices something that is amiss, something that is wrong with the sounds of this giant. A hitch in the tempo. And then here we go. Two furnace eyes gazed upon him then. And again, I forgot to go back, but I mentioned the button he presses, kind of staring at him right here. So the panel's button burned his retinas, then his cheek as he looked away. So he set foot upon Fatorian. So again, a little bit of a foreshadowing. Again, it's really not very powerful. I don't think it comes together in the end, but that's what I was trying to do essentially, is foreshadow more of what was going to happen. especially how it's burning his neck, which leads us to the part with the giant where it rips its head free, but he notices this dancing lightning. But before that, when the giant first looks at him, it reminds him of a fire upon an old man's face. And so that was the elder earlier. They burned like the moon that had guided him, but one too many, meaning like it's not twin moons. And I did play with that. I did play with the fact that there were 2 moons on his home planet, and that's what guided him. But I took it to a singular one because the image, right? Because half the giant's head is submerged into the earth. And again, I don't know what I was doing here. I had him, his suit tore up and, wondering how is he surviving here. Yet he lived, warmed by these 2 fires that sought to destroy him. But he starts to remember, thrumming with the anomalous song of "To wander upon the song of the gods." So the sound of this giant reminded him of what he needed to remember. I used to have this be the shoulders because he's literally on the shoulders, but I like the idea of sound better, so I changed it when I was editing it. And to rend the bottled lightning, which would ink the map to salvation. So this is when he knows what they seek, right? He remembers this right. And again, I think this is essentially the riddle. He finds the answer to it. But is it powerful? Does it make sense in the context of the scene? Do the actions that he makes or reacts to, does any of that trigger this stuff? Kind of, right? So when we see the cylindrical enclosure where lightning danced. So another another thing I could have done is probably made that, lightning striking when he was climbing up that mountain to these conspiring men, the order, so to speak. But the giant parts the way for this death, but he decides to no. He says no as hands came down in a blur, gripping the head. Essentially, the giant tears its head off, throws it to the ground, but then he survives. He survives the fall. Breck woke to a fire, single fire, within the visor of a helm, pocked like the surface he lay upon. And then finally, he approaches the severed head, which is, again, more repetition to clue the reader into what I was doing, which looked like a guiding move above the hold of conspiring men, where the answer to a riddle had been locked in a fall, now set free. So again, I think there's things there that work for sure. I think like where it lacks its power is that it's not all connected. And so I think when you're writing stuff, I think it's really important to have those elements where what I was trying to do essentially is make it to where the character came to the revelation, right? It wasn't that the reader came to the revelation as sort of an omniscient or an observer to this entire thing, but I always try to think things through with character. And that, like I said, that's where it kind of fell flat a little bit. But I think there are things there that I can fix in subsequent rewrites when I do eventually publish this in the anthology. But that is not for today. That is not about the exercise. That is about just getting words on the page, documenting the process, showing you what I did, why I did it, and maybe you can learn in your own work of what not to do. And clearly I took a little bit of a deeper dive on this one because it was a failing, I feel like. Not completely. It's totally fixable. I believe most stories, if not all stories, are salvageable. But I thought I would point out the things I was trying to do and the mistakes I made. But that is it for me. That is the end of this tale of the riddle. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you'd like to support the channel, give me a like if you liked the video. Subscribe for story-related content. Come hang out with me on my Discord. We got a lot of cool conversations going on about storytelling in general. Free to join. The link is in the description. Also, you can buy my books. I have 3 books out currently. The anthology of this very series you're watching is in the hands of an editor. Hopefully, will be done very, very soon because she's had it for a little while. But anyway, excited to get that out. And on that note, keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read the story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't edit anything else, promise. Thanks again.